Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Protests continued across California today, including here in San Diego County. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Carroll in for Maya Trabulsi. We've seen demonstrations in support of immigrant communities over the past few days. KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne joins us live from Oceanside now, where protesters are gathering for a second day. And Tanya, I can hear them there in the background.
Yes, John, it's a second day in a row for protests here in Oceanside, but we've been seeing this protest happening throughout the county, just like the one that's right behind me, in support of immigrant communities. We're here at the intersection of Oceanside Boulevard and College Boulevard, where you can see supporters waving flags and holding signs. This all started after an increase of federal immigration operations happening throughout the state, as well as President Trump's executive order threatening birthright citizenship. Last week, we covered the impact these operations have had on local immigrant communities, such as a drop in church attendance, a drop in business, and overall fear being felt. We spoke to Jacqueline Esparza, a high school senior, earlier today, the organizer of this protest. She said her parents migrated here from Guadalajara, Mexico in 1993.
They've given me the life that they've always wanted. They gave me an education. They raised me to fight for what was right. Sorry, I get a little emotional. I do this for my parents and for my family and for my country. I do this because we need change in our country. We need change as individuals. We need to better ourselves for our communities.
John, supporters are here standing in solidarity with immigrants being impacted by the federal orders coming down from the Trump administration. Some also participated in today's day without an immigrant, keeping their kids home from school, skipping work, and shopping. Some local businesses chose to also remain closed for the entire day. And now we're going to see more of these protests happening throughout the region because there's more planned throughout the week. Live from Oceanside, Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
Thorne live in Oceanside. Thank you. Protests are happening across California. Hundreds of people gathered in downtown Los Angeles today, continuing demonstrations for a second day in the city. And in the San Francisco Bay Area, some small businesses closed for the day in support of a day without immigrants.
It's not to affect businesses. It's just to prove we are car with our power, with our money, but we can contribute to this country, to the economy.
Last night, thousands of protesters marched to Los Angeles City Hall, with many making their way onto the 101 freeway. They blocked traffic and clashed with law enforcement before dispersing. More than $80 billion in cross-border trade flows between San Diego and Tijuana each year. Local business leaders told KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis that President Trump's threatened tariffs on Mexican imports could devastate the border region's economy.
We live in a world of integrated supply chains, where components of one product cross the border multiple times before it finally hits the market.
Toyota's a good example. The Toyota Tacoma, that gets assembled between San Diego and Tijuana. You see parts cross the border maybe 5-6 times before the truck is even fully assembled.
That's Jessica Anderson, interim president and CEO of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce. She spent the last weekend hearing from businesses on both sides of the border that they're worried about how tariffs might impact this finely tuned system.
For some, it's can my business even survive this? It's not even simply about, do I just need to raise prices a little bit, or maybe I don't put that new product out or hold off on that new product launch. This is life and death for some businesses.
Thankfully for those businesses, the tariffs are not happening. For now.
Llegamos al acuerdo que está en el acuerdo que se puso.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum today announced a last-minute deal with President Trump to avoid tariffs. She promised to send more National Guard troops to stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S., and Trump said that he tried to stop the flow of illegal guns into Mexico. They agreed to put the tariffs on hold for 1 month. But what happens at the end of the month? Businesses say that the uncertainty is already having a negative impact.
We will never know the impact of all the investors that were thinking of moving here or expanding, which will not happen for sure.
Alejandra Mier Iteran is the executive director of the Otay Mesa Chamber of Commerce, where 80% of the businesses are trade-related. She says it's just not fair that local businesses are getting caught in the middle of these international negotiations. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
Today, President Trump said he would also hold off on imposing tariffs on Canada for the next 30 days. But the back and forth has developers concerned. Our media partner, KGTV, spoke with Stephen Russell at the San Diego Housing Federation. He says a tariff on Canadian imports could increase the cost of lumber and eventually slow down new developments. He knows of more than 50 affordable housing projects in the works that could cost millions more.
Any uncertainty, banks tighten up their money, builders take fewer contracts, workers make decisions about whether or not to stay in the trades. All of these things are affected by these external conditions, and you can't just turn this on and off like a light switch and it's back to normal.
Experts estimate around 30% of softwood lumber in the U.S. comes from Canada. Russell says if a tariff is imposed, everything under construction right now would be completed, but new projects won't be started, and those in the early stages could run out of money.
Taking a look ahead, tonight we're dropping down to a low of 54 here in San Diego. Now, across the rest of the region, we'll have a lot of those partly cloudy skies, but we do have activity here on the horizon. We'll tell you when that rain is set to move back in and how temperatures will react as we have an onshore flow over the next few days.
Late Friday, the Pentagon announced so-called identity months were, quote, dead at the Defense Department. KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer spoke to one activist who says the Trump administration is waging a culture war in the military.
Celebrations and observances for all cultural awareness months are canceled across the U.S. military. On Friday, the day before Black History Month began, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth called such observances efforts to divide the military and put one group ahead of others. In a news release titled Identity Months Dead at DoD, Hegseth banned any observances recognizing cultural awareness months of Black people, women, Asian Americans, Native Americans, Pacific Islanders, Hispanics, the disabled, and LGBTQ+ people. Christopher Goldsmith is the founder of the Task Force Butler Institute and Veterans Fighting Fascism. The Army veteran says the stories and history of people are big parts of military culture.
Because history matters. You cannot find a unit in the military where they aren't very deliberate about ingraining their newest troops with all of the obscure battles that this unit went through decades and decades, generations ago, right? Because that stuff is important.
After Donald Trump ordered the end of all diversity initiatives across the government, his first week in office, the Air Force temporarily removed a lesson on the Tuskegee Airmen from its boot camp curriculum. While that was rescinded, Goldsmith says it's a result of the racist motives behind the anti-diversity push.
That is the only reason that they want to carve out just these specific pieces of history, because they're not saying no more lessons about Chesty Puller. They're not saying no more lessons about Audie Murphy, right? They're saying no more lessons about the Tuskegee Airmen. That is a deliberate choice, and it is a racist choice.
The president has also ordered the Pentagon to again institute a ban on transgender people in uniform. Goldsmith says these policies are going to hurt the military in the long run when it comes to recruiting and retention.
The military is the most diverse organization on the planet. And it is a level of diversity that I think most of Americans don't necessarily think of all the time.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's office did not respond to a request for comment. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
Recovery efforts continued today as crews search for the remaining victims of last week's Midair crash. 67 people were killed when a passenger plane and an Army Black Hawk helicopter collided near Reagan National Airport in D.C. Laura Aguirre reports the tragedy is adding fuel to the ongoing national debate about how to make U.S. air travel safer and to keep it that way.
Recovery crews with cranes are pulling plane debris from the floor of the Potomac River today. Remains of last week's deadly midair collision between a passenger jet and Army Black Hawk helicopter. The work also giving divers a chance to bring the final victims home. Recovered flight data and voice recorders from both aircraft are being analyzed by the NTSB. Preliminary findings shared over the weekend indicate the jet's crew may have seen the Black Hawk in the final moment.
They pitched the nose up towards the sky, most likely, but it means they saw it just a second before impact. You cannot move out of the way that fast.
The NTSB is expected to release more detailed findings from the recordings soon, as the nation's aviation safety is increasingly being called into question.
We have the safest airspace in the world.
The Transportation Secretary offering reassurance, while images from D.C. and Philadelphia fill the headlines. That's where a medevac plane crashed into a residential neighborhood Friday, killing at least 7 people shortly after takeoff.
A lot of the systems we use date back to World War II. We have to upgrade the system. We're going to surge air traffic controllers.
One former air traffic tower supervisor says that'll be a challenge.
The training time for a controller from the completion of their pre-training till when they're able to work on their own in a complex facility can run between 36 and 48 months.
As the debate rolls on, there's one thing officials and most air travelers agree on.
We have to have the best system in the world.
I'm Laura Aguirre for KPBS News.
Millions of Americans have brain diseases and disorders. What causes them and how to prevent them is still unknown in many cases. That's because much of the research has been focused on patients after diagnosis. But as Mandy Gaither reports, a large brain study happening now is aimed at changing that.
It includes Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, strokes, and epilepsy. Brain diseases and disorders affect so many people, but researchers say right now the root cause of many of them is still not fully understood.
Therefore, we cannot come up with any therapeutic or any treatment for most of the neurodegenerative disorders.
That's why Dr. Ahmad Najm and his team at Cleveland Clinic launched a large-scale brain study 3 years ago, hoping to not only help treat these diseases after diagnosis, but also to potentially prevent them altogether.
We are looking at the body and the brain before the disease happens. And this is what we call the silent phase.
During that phase, Najm says changes in the brain begin to happen years before symptoms start. For this study, researchers have enrolled nearly 3,600 healthy adults. Participants are aged 50 and older with no known neurological disorder, or a healthy adult aged 20 and above who have a family history of multiple sclerosis. They'll undergo testing and be monitored over the course of 20 years.
The ultimate hope is to find out what we call therapeutic biomarker. One of these changes could be a target of development of a new medication or repurposing of a medication that's already approved.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
The policies and procedures of local government aren't always well understood, but a new video series aims to change that. It's called San Diego 101, and it's a product of the KPBS Public Matters Partnership to explain local politics and policy. Bella Ross with our nonprofit partner Voice of San Diego is here to tell us more about it. And Bella, I know that these videos came about in a different way than its predecessor. What's the origin story of this series?
Right, so San Diego 101 has been around for a while before me to really explain local government, some of the mundane stuff that maybe we take for granted as journalists, understanding like what is a city charter, how does the police work, how does a city budget work, and like really breaking that down for people. And so I had the opportunity to bring this series back, and I wanted to talk about, you know, how to attend a public meeting, because I think that people are always told, oh, get involved with local government, but I don't know that people know exactly what that looks like or how to do that. So I wanted to give people the tools to, you know, figure that out.
Yeah, so important nowadays, for sure. And you've given the first new episode sort of a retro look, sort of like a 90s public access television thing where you're looking right into the camera. So What inspired those particular stylistic choices?
Very specifically the 90s public access. I watched a lot of old news clips and like really tried to lean into the kind of like corniness, or what we see as corniness when we look back at it now. And the reason for that was personal, in the sense that I'm personally interested in the vintage aesthetics, and so it was a really fun experiment for me. But also I think it's a really intergenerational interest, in the sense that young people are always trying to emulate back in the day, and older folks are like looking back at it through that nostalgic view. So I'm hoping that taking this retro aesthetic is something that resonates with a wide range of audiences.
Right.
All right.
And we have something to show exactly what you're talking about, right?
Yes, let's take a look. Are you a concerned citizen who wants to make a difference in your community? Do you enjoy languishing under the fluorescent lights while listening to your neighbors air their niche municipal grievances? Perhaps you want to voice some concerns to your local elected officials. If any of these apply, you should consider attending a public meeting. Transparency is a core piece of the democratic process, but open government doesn't mean anything if nobody's looking. That's where you come in. Government officials are legally obligated to listen to us because our tax dollars fund their salaries, and there's no better place to exercise this right than in your local council chambers. The law requires meeting agendas to be posted online and in an accessible physical location at least 3 days before the meeting. What is your best advice for finding what I need to find in the council agenda before attending a meeting?
There is a lot that goes into every council agenda. My very first advice would be don't look at the agenda to begin with. You're going to get overwhelmed. It's going to be too much. My office actually creates what's called a summary agenda, or a list of agenda items. What we do is actually break down the agenda for you and put it in an easy to read format. Once you actually know what items of interest you have and what items you want to speak to or learn more about, maybe, you just get that item number and then go to the agenda. And on the agenda, you can search for item 100, for example. There'll be a hyperlink there and you can click to see all the backup information.
The World Wide Web has done many wonderful things, including granting us the ability to watch public meetings from anywhere we'd like. But if you feel so inclined, attending a meeting in person can be quite the adventure. San Diego City Council meetings occur on the 12th floor of the City Administration Building, and County Board of Supervisors meetings are held on the 3rd floor of the County Administration Building. To find specific dates and times for public meetings, including for committee meetings that cover more specific topics such as land use and housing, you'll want to find the legislative calendar on the city or county website. Public meetings can be a real whirlwind, or sometimes they're about as entertaining as watching paint dry, but they're all important. One of the most valuable facets of public meetings are public comments, which give citizens an opportunity to participate in the democratic process. Comments can be delivered virtually, in person, or in writing. To speak in person, you will need to fill out a speaker slip and put it in the designated box. Speakers will be called up when the relevant agenda item is being discussed or during non-agenda public comment. Most meetings will limit comments to 1 to 3 minutes, but some legislative bodies, such as the San Diego City Council, allow in-person attendees to give their time to other speakers, adding up to 15 minutes.
Come prepared. Know what you want to speak about. Maybe even write it down so that you can have a really effective communication. The important thing is to know what you're talking about and what you're asking for.
You can always refer to the meeting agenda for more commenting guidelines. Free speech is protected by the First Amendment, but some government bodies have moved to limit speech at public meetings in an attempt to address the increase in bad behavior. That said, here are some things you should and should not do at a public meeting. Do not make inappropriate, irrelevant, or personal comments, although it is your right. Do respectfully conclude speaking at the end of your allotted time. Do not go severely off topic or try to broach issues outside of the council's jurisdiction. Do snap an agreement with speakers as opposed to engaging in loud, lengthy applause. Once public comment has concluded, elected officials will take a vote.
You can usually find a record of any decisions or public comments made during a meeting in the meeting minutes in the following days. Being an active and engaged member of your community may be the closest thing we have to a cure for political pessimism. A public meeting may not be the most glamorous way to spend your precious hours on this earth, but they're a very important and sometimes interesting part of the democratic process. And while it may feel like you're screaming into the void, public comments can and do make a difference. That's all from me. Happy commenting.
Okay, so aside from making me feel old by calling the 90s retro, what can we look forward to from some future San Diego 101 episodes?
I'm really trying to tap into the news you can use. You know, I think us as journalists, we do a really good job at informing people and keeping them updated on the news, but I want to take it just a little bit further by telling them, you know, applying the news and also telling them what they can do with that information to hopefully be more engaged in their community. So more to come.
Yes, wonderful. We'll look forward to it. Voice of San Diego is one of our partners for the Public Matters Initiative. You can learn more at kpbs.org/Public Matters. Thanks, Bella.
Thank you.
Your weather headlines for this week. There's a lot going on. Let's start with number one, atmospheric river. We are talking about an influx of moisture coming onshore, and it's taking aim at Southern California this time. This is going to go through the middle of the week, where we will have periods of gusty onshore winds and, well, temperatures. They react how you could expect when we see more moisture moving in. You start to see that rain training over some of these areas. They cool down a bit here, at least throughout our Tuesday into Wednesday. Let's look at tonight, though, across the region. You're at 48 in Oceanside. You're down to 44 in Ramona, Mount Laguna at 46. Waking up tomorrow, a little bit on the chillier side, but by the afternoon, we're rising to the 60s. 64 there, topping off in San Diego. Even at 63 in Oceanside. Even further inland, you'll have the sunshine in place. Though, watch what happens. We do have changes on the way as we do head into our Wednesday. This is Tuesday night. We're already starting to see that rain, which it has been ongoing through the Sacramento, San Joaquin valleys, even up through the Sierra, where we've seen some of that heavier snow. To the south, though, we will start to see that rain come on shore, and anywhere from Newport Beach to San Diego, we could see some showery activity here with this narrow plume of moisture. It's basically like a fire hose right aimed at SoCal Tuesday night into Wednesday. Now, over the next few days, temperature-wise, you'll start to see the dreary conditions settle in Wednesday, Thursday, even having some periods of rain there by Friday. Temperatures here along the coast do stay relatively steady with some slight dips, but watch what happens by the end of the week. If you are further inland, you'll start to see those temperatures drop down to the low 60s there by Friday, and we're to the 40s in the mountains, and we'll also have some morning rain and also some low clouds here over the next few days. So make sure that you are staying weather aware. We do dry out somewhat here as we head into the weekend, sunny and pleasant even for the deserts, but you'll even see those clouds in the deserts by Wednesday. Temperatures do take a little bit of a hit. We're at 71 by Friday. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Bree Guy.
February is Black History Month. KPBS reporter Melissa May takes us to the San Diego Unified School District, where students raised the Black History Month flag today.
About 200 members of Black student unions from 10 different San Diego Unified schools gathered to commemorate the beginning of Black History Month.
It's a moment for us as students to stand proud and united, knowing we're part of the history in the making.
Students of all ages shared speeches and poetry, including kindergartner Malachi Connors.
Black history taught me that you can become anybody you want to become. You can become anybody. You can become Martin Luther King, Ruby Bridges. You can become Steph Curry. You can become anybody you want.
Malia Mims is a freshman at Patrick Henry High School. She says her school's Black Student Union has helped her learn about her culture.
Throughout history, Black individuals have broken barriers and created opportunities where there once were none. This was not an easy task for them. The people who paved the way for us did not have a Wi-Fi or even basic human rights, yet they still managed to change the world. Their contributions have shaped the world where we live today, and their legacy continue to inspire us.
Alicia Elzine is a project resource teacher with San Diego Unified. She says the students' messages are coming at an important moment.
To really show their pride in Black History Month, in their identities, and especially representing our school district in a time where, many school districts are silencing the voices that need to be heard.
Elzine says the school district prides itself on centering students' voices.
I just hope that we are able to continue uplifting the voices, celebrating the joy and the resilience of Black folks in our community, whether you're an adult in the district, a parent, or a student, knowing that you're represented and your voice is heard and appreciated, I think is the key.
The ceremony wrapped up with the raising of the Black History Month flag and a rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Let us march on till victory is won.
Melissa May, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, which is kpbs.org. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm John Carroll. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.